Today, I'll present Pretium, a framework that combines dynamic pricing and traffic engineering for the wide area network. This is joint work with colleagues at Microsoft. The general scenario we consider in this work is of businesses and individuals with data in the cloud wishing to push data between data centers. As we all know, bandwidth on the wide area network is a valuable and costly resource. Network providers prefer not to over-provision, hence the need to carefully schedule network transfers. The general task of scheduling network transfers across time and network paths is often referred to as traffic engineering, or TE in short. At a high level, the objective is to keep the costs low, both provisioning and usage costs. One inherent challenge of TE in our context is the heterogeneity among users. Some users require a fixed rate, for example, video streaming applications. Other users need to make large transfers by a certain deadline. For example, transfer a search index from one data center to the other. On top of that, we may have high priority requests that need immediate low latency service. Let's dive in a little bit to understand how the input to TE looks like. A wide area network bandwidth request has a source and destination, and it may include a begin time and a deadline, a demand in the form of either total bytes or rate, and optionally a value or priority. Recent work has considered different aspects of TE, such as achieving fairness among requests, increasing utilization, and meeting deadlines. However, no prior work explicitly studied the potential issue of gaming TE, in which users can provide false inputs to the TE model. For example, users may inflate their value or priority, or report a stricter deadline than their true one, with the hope of improving their service. At a high level, the challenge behind our work is to elicit truthful requirements from users, which will enable us to perform efficient traffic engineering. If the network operator knows the true requirements of requests, it has more leverage to cope with heterogeneity and schedule requests better. Pricing in general is a mean for extracting user requirements. Unfortunately, however, current pricing schemes do not help eliciting detailed information from users. The current state of the art is a flat price structure, and you can see a couple of examples on the slide. Pricing is static and does not incorporate deadlines, total demands, priorities, and considerations regarding the current state of the network. As a consequence, network providers might not have accurate information about request specifications, and any underlying scheduler cannot exploit the flexibility of, for example, users having some deadline slackness in their transfers. In other words, pricing decisions are agnostic to traffic engineering objectives. This situation obviously hurts the users as well, as they cannot really opt to pay more for better service. To understand whether users will be willing to accept a change in their price structure, we conducted an internal survey among users and operators. More than 80% of the users mentioned that they will be willing to delay their transfers, assuming they have some deadline slackness, if they get a lower price. Further, they will be willing to accept a dynamic price which is communicated ahead of the service, as long as the quality of service is guaranteed. The goal of this work is therefore to design a combined pricing and TE framework that pushes users towards being truthful, provides quality of service guarantees on admission based on what users specify in the pricing APIs, and maximizes the aggregate network efficiency while being aware of costs. As a concrete measure of efficiency, we use the system's welfare, defined as the total value of admitted requests minus the operating costs. On the algorithmic side, one high-level challenge worth mentioning is that both pricing and TE must be done online, without complete knowledge of the future. Further, the operating costs often have a non-linear structure. For example, they may be proportional to the 95th percentile usage over some time window. Here is a high-level overview of Pretium. Requests arrive into the system and in return get some price quote based on their specified requirements. The quote, which specifies prices for different transfer options, is based on the current network state and commitments to previous requests. Pretium also decides on the scheduling and routing of requests that accepted one of the price choices. Zooming in on Pretium architecture, there are three models. The admission control module generates price quotes to incoming requests based on internal shadow prices. These requests are then tentatively scheduled. The scheduler adjustment module does the actual scheduling and routing, while repeatedly adjusting the schedule, taking into account the current network state and cost considerations. The price controller occasionally recomputes link prices given historical usage. The three models operate at different timescales. The admission controller reacts almost immediately to give the requests adequate service experience. The schedule adjustment acts every few minutes, which gives enough time to adapt the routes and traffic sources as needed. The price computer operates at a slow timescale, say every few hours. This is key for the stability of the system and user perception. Before providing details on the Pretium models, let's overview the internal pricing model used in Pretium. Pretium maintains internal prices per link and future time step. In this example, we see a toy network with 3 links, where we show the prices and available capacities for the first 2 time steps. Each time step could correspond to 5 minutes of actual time. Suppose the available capacity at all links is 1 gigabyte, except the 2 upper links at time step 1, whose available capacity is 4 gigabytes. The drop in capacity on these links from time step 1 to 2 might be due to other requests that were already assigned to use the links at time step 2. Note that the prices are dynamic and can change across the 2 time steps. The price given to the request you see at the bottom will be determined by emulating its routing across feasible paths, starting from the cheapest one until demand is satisfied. So in this example, the request will first use the lower path at time step 1, which costs $1 per gigabyte, but since the available capacity in that path is only 1 gigabyte, we'll need to use another path, the second best one, which is the upper path at t equals to 2 for 1 plus 1 equals $2 per gigabyte. The total charge is therefore $3 for the 2 gigabytes. After we got a sense of the pricing model used in Pretium, we can describe now in more detail the admission control module, which can be thought of as the interface between the provider and the user. As mentioned earlier, admission control is done by providing a price quote or menu to users, who choose their service characteristics according to their own price versus quality trade-off. The quote consists of 1 price curve per deadline. In the graph you see on the right, we zoom in on 2 deadlines, t equals to 1, which corresponds to an immediate transfer, and t equals to 2. Each curve gives the total price as a function of the amount of data the user may be interested in transferring by a certain deadline. Returning to the request from the previous slide, note that the user can choose to send, for example, only 1 gigabyte for the lesser price of $2, or the entire 2 gigabytes for $3, as we've shown before. Note that the slope of each curve is strictly increasing, a consequence of choosing cheapest path first. As expected, the price quote for deadline equals to 1 is strictly above the one for deadline equals to 2, for which the scheduler has more flexibility. The schedule adjustment, or the TE model, runs every time step to improve the timing and routing choices of transfers as more information is received. Specifically, that is done by solving a mathematical program. We won't go into a detailed formulation of the program, but here is a conceptual representation. We aim at maximizing the welfare, namely the value minus the operating costs, under 2 types of constraints. The first is satisfying the guarantees based on the user selections from the price menu, and the second is respecting the link capacity constraints over time. A few things are worth mentioning about the optimization problem. First, why don't we simply minimize the operating costs, given that the guarantees from the admission control presumably already determine the total value of requests satisfied? Well, the idea here is that TE may route more traffic than promised by the admission controller, for example, for requests with guarantees only on part of their demand. Second, we put a star next to the value to indicate that the TE model doesn't really know the value of the requests, but rather uses the price they paid as a proxy for their per byte value. Third, Pretium sets the capacity constraint in a way that leaves some slack for projected high priority traffic. The exact details can be found in the paper. I'd like to focus now on the cost term in the objective function. The operating costs are typically nonlinear, actually even non-convex. Specifically, the operator may lease some of the links and pay according to the 95th percentile usage over a certain time period, say an hour or a day. In the figure, you see an illustration of a potential load pattern over some link and the corresponding 95th percentile usage. To circumvent the non-convexity and make the problem tractable, we apply the following trick. We approximate the 95th percentile usage by the average top 10% usage. As one can see, the values of these two measures are close. We verified this intuition via experiments over a variety of load distributions. The nice thing about using the top 10% measure is that we have an elegant way to translate that measure to a collection of linear constraints, which allows the schedule adjustment model to solve a tractable linear program. The details of the machinery we use can be found in the paper. As mentioned before, the price computation is done at a slow timescale, say once every few hours. How does Pretium recompute prices? In a nutshell, we take past requests and solve an offline welfare maximization problem, again, using the price they paid as a proxy for value. The resulting optimization problem is NLP, and the solution to the dual formulation actually gives us the prices per link per time step. Because the demand has a fairly periodic daily pattern, we use as reference window the corresponding time period of the previous day. We know that we use requests from a wider time period in the optimization to deal with distortion at the beginning and the end of the reference window. Finally, to account for instantaneous spiky demand, we supplement this price computation with a more reactive online adjustment of prices. Specifically, Pretium increases, say doubles, the price of links whose utilization crosses a certain threshold. In the paper, we argue that the particular form of pricing we use in Pretium elicits truthful reports from users. I won't go into details here, but would just mention that formal incentive compatibility guarantees require some additional technical assumptions. If the assumptions do not hold, we show in the paper that in practice, users do not gain much by misreporting their request parameters. To evaluate the benefits of Pretium, we use traffic traces from an Inter-DC1 at Microsoft. The network consists of a total of around 100 nodes, which represent data centers or peering sites, and more than 200 edges. The traffic data consists of net flow traces, which were collected every 5 minutes. They include the number of bytes transferred on every link for each 5-minute interval. We use the input from network operators to understand typical request characteristics, like demand and duration, and generated requests that mimic the observed traffic traces. As the value per byte of request is unknown, we used several random distributions to generate the value. In this talk, I will present only the results that use a normal distribution. The total value is assumed to be linear in the number of bytes transferred. We built a simulator that replaces traces of requests, schedules them, and prices them appropriately. We compared Pretium with several baselines. In this talk, I'm going to focus on 3 of them. The first is opt, an offline optimal scheme which has full knowledge of all future request arrivals and request values. The solution of this algorithm provides us with an upper bound on how well any pricing scheme can perform. The second one is a region-based pricing scheme. The network is divided into multiple regions based on the geographic location of the nodes. Transfers that cross region boundaries are charged a higher price, and those within a region are charged a lower price. We run the simulations with many possible low and high prices and select in hindsight the price tuple, which results in the highest welfare. This is why we call the scheme an oracle. The third one is a time-based pricing scheme, which divides the day into a peak and off-peak periods and charges a higher price during the peak period and a lower price during the off-peak period. The peak and off-peak periods are determined based on history. As in the region oracle scheme, we explore all possible high and low price tuples and choose the one that generates the highest welfare in hindsight. I'll show now a subset of the experimental results. This graph shows the welfare achieved by the algorithms relative to the welfare of the optimal scheme opt as we increase the load over the WAN. The higher the load factor, the higher is the load in the network. We see that at lower load, region oracle and peak oracle get no more than 18% of opt's welfare. Intuitively, both these schemes cannot differentiate between low and high value requests, often set high prices to offset the cost to the requests, and fail to admit many requests which are in fact admitted by Pretium. Pretium achieves around 70 to 80% of the optimal welfare. At a higher load, the welfares of region oracle and peak oracle are at 10 and 30% of the optimal welfare, respectively. The higher relative welfare is because there are more high-valued requests available. On the other hand, the relative welfare of Pretium falls a bit, as any online scheme naturally suffers from congestion effects. Nevertheless, Pretium still significantly outperforms the other baselines. One of the main reasons why Pretium achieves better welfare is because it prices bandwidth higher when the utilization of the network is higher. This graph depicts a timeline of the prices for a sample link, shown by the solid black line, along with the link utilization, shown by the dashed brown line. We see that at higher utilization, prices tend to be higher, which enables differentiation based on value. Overall, Pretium is typically able to change prices based on request values. The graph on the right shows a scatter plot of the value per byte of admitted requests on the x-axis and the price per byte they paid on the y-axis. Pretium has a more flexible and dynamic price for different requests. This allows filtering out requests with high value by charging high prices when needed and lowering the prices to accommodate a wide range of requests when possible. Peak oracle and region oracle often charge a relatively high price, as shown by the blue X's and the red pluses, and hence a large fraction of requests might opt out. Other experimental results can be found in the paper. The main takeaway from our work is that it is worthwhile combining dynamic pricing and traffic engineering in one framework. In Pretium, the traffic engineering takes the guarantees or promises given to users as input and repeatedly refines the schedule towards a lower cost operating point. Prices are computed on slow timescale based on history. Our simulations show sizable welfare gains relative to static pricing. Generally speaking, some of the specific techniques we introduced can perhaps be refined or even replaced as long as the pricing and TE coupling remains. For example, one may consider other demand estimation techniques for calculating prices. There are many aspects that deserve deeper dive to make Pretium broadly applicable. One interesting direction for future work is to examine nonlinear user utilities, as in Google's Bandwidth Enforcer paper. Lastly, our main performance objective has been welfare maximization. In public clouds, welfare maximization is still relevant, as it gives a quality edge over competitors. Nevertheless, it would be interesting to examine how Pretium's mechanisms would change under the assumption that profit maximization is the main goal. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be now happy to take some questions.